Hello and welcome to Champagne Football, the show in which your hosts get drunk and slur their opinions on the footballing events of the past week. As ever, with me, we have Becky. How are you doing, Becky?
Doing great. How are you, Hal?
I'm all right. I'm getting by. And tell me, who do we have as a special guest this week?
We are lucky to be joined by Matt Murphy from Sky Sports News. And Matt, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and the work that you do?
Hey guys, yeah, very happy to be on. So I freelance at Sky. I do other bits elsewhere, but yeah, Sky is my main place of work. Up until about a month and a half ago, I was helping compile sports bulletins and writing articles online. It then was reduced to just writing articles online because there's no real sports bulletins right now. That our department has kind of shut that element down because there's just not enough going on to do them. And yeah, that's what I've been doing up until then. I used to also work for the Independent, and I used to report on the Football League for them.
Cool. So as ever, we like to compare our drink to either a football team, a player, or even a league. This week I'm drinking the same homebrew. So I won't elaborate on that anymore. You'll have to listen to last week's episode if you want to find out what I compared that to. That's marketing for you. But Becky, what are you drinking?
I've got a ginger and rhubarb ginger and gin drink. It's a Whitley Neal gin, which is brewed in or made in Liverpool. And it is the best drink I've had in weeks. My sister made it for me. It's delicious. It's so refreshing. It's so good. So I've got to compare it to Liverpool. And I think it might be a similar gin to what our guest Matt is drinking today.
Yeah, so I actually, strangely enough, I had no idea that you would be drinking that, but I also have a Whitley Neal. I feel like this episode is not sponsored by Whitley Neal, is it? It's not.
But if they want to send us any free gin, I'll take it.
But mine's a raspberry one, so it's a red bottle and it's brewed in Merseyside, so it makes sense. But I've actually gone for a player rather than Liverpool itself. My housemate actually pointed this out because he is a Liverpool fan and said it's like Ginny Wijnaldum. So Ginny Wijnaldum. It's a terrible pun, but that's what I'm going for.
We love the puns.
It had to be said, actually. Like it had to.
I'm surprised I didn't think of it myself, but yeah, I'll happily take that.
That could end up as a whole new section of the pod. Alcohol-related footballer puns. We're going to have to look into that.
I think James Milner did something on his Twitter, his Instagram, so we might have to take a peek at that as well.
Yeah. All right, so we try to cover recent events, and obviously there aren't so many happening these days. But Matt, I was interested to hear your thoughts on Troy Deeney's comments today. He sort of talked about wanting to put his family first, and he doesn't seem to be particularly keen to come back and play football in any kind of rush.
I can understand that. I think it's something that everyone's thinking about. It's not just limited to football. It's anyone thinking about returning to work. I've been worried about returning to work. I'm sure loads of people are. And, football is, to be honest, being rushed back because of money and because loads of people miss something, like we all do. They need to put it back on the screen. And to be honest, I share his concerns. And I mean, anyone who is trying to put pressure on him or put pressure on any players who don't feel comfortable playing, I think, it would be very unfair. It'd be very unfair to do so. I think it's right that footballers should speak out as well, because often, and especially during this time, some players have, because out of sheer boredom and having nothing else to do, you see them coming forth and starting to share their opinions, where normally footballers just stick to what their club tell them to say and think. And the typical kind of modern footballer kind of personality is very shielded. So it's important, I think, players come forward and say that. I think the PFA have a big job in helping to represent those views as well. So if there are other players like Troy, I think they should be encouraged to come out and say that.
Yeah, I know Grant Hanley, the Norwich captain, he's expecting a child in July, I think, and he also raised the point that, you know, if players are going to be sent away to camps or something and isolated within their own teams, is he not going to be there for his child? So you can see an obvious conflict for him there. Becky, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I completely agree with Troy Deeney on this one, and he is not spoke for, so I'm not surprised to see him making comments either. He said, if I have to go broke, I've done it before. I'm happy to do it again. And I think it's those kinds of statements that really make an impact with a lot of people as well. That's not about the money for him. It's about the safety of his family. So I think, like Matt said, it's important that players speak out. I do think it'll be interesting after this weekend to see how the start of the Bundesliga goes. And if it does very well, we might get more players say, I don't think we should go ahead and start yet.
Yeah, I'm interested on the Bundesliga. Are you guys going to be tuning in this weekend, or can you not sort of get your heads around the idea of live football? Matt?
I think I will be. It's weird because the concept of a weekend and a routine has been one that has just gone out the window in the last couple of months. But it'd be nice to see some actual live football. It'll be very weird. It'll feel like it is behind closed doors games, but for a completely different reason. So yeah, I think it's weird. I saw one of my friends wrote a piece about how I disagree with football coming back as such. Right now, I feel like it is too early, but at the same time, if you can't influence it in some way, you know, they won't care about how few or how many people watch it. They just want it back. And I think, you know, I can't protest in that way. So I feel like you've kind of just got to give in to the fact that it is coming back and try and enjoy it for the, you know, while it is there. So yeah, I'm kind of glad to see some form of football back at least.
Yeah, I'm glad to see it back. I will be sitting on watching as many matches as I possibly can. So I'll have my football fix, hopefully.
The idea of just waking up tomorrow, making some lunch, and then watching football is so abstract, but I think I'll enjoy that very much.
It says a lot about you, how waking up and making some lunch.
Trust me, it's been discussed on the podcast before. I would like to blame the virus for my sleeping patterns, but to be honest, nah.
You're not the only one, yeah.
Anyway, so we thought it would be great to look back at some of the most enjoyable and bizarre games that we've had the good fortune of watching. Becky, I want to start with you. I'm not sure I do actually, but I'm going to start with you anyway.
Yeah, Hal's not going to like this one very much, but for me, my favorite game I've ever watched, greatest game in my go back to 2011, watching it at home on the TV, unfortunately, over in Vancouver, in Canada at the time. And Hal, as an Arsenal fan, is really going to hate this, but it was Man U beating Arsenal 8-2. A beautiful hat trick in Rooney. A couple beautiful goals from Ashley Young, probably the highlight of his entire career, in my opinion. He didn't do much after that. But it was just, it was right at the start of the season. It was in August. It was just an exclamation mark on what would be a couple good years for United before our downfall. But it was such a good memory, and I'm really, I'm not sorry, Hal. I'm really not.
That was so horrible. I don't know, 2011, did you say? I was probably, I don't know, 15, 16 years old. I'm not sure. And I remember I was living in New Zealand at that time. So you'd get up in the early hours of the morning to watch the game. And then I think it was on a school night. So the next morning I had to go to school with no sleep and having just watched Arsenal lose 8-2 to Manchester United. I think that was one of the toughest days of my educational experience. I also remember Van Persie missed the penalty, I think, when it was 1-0 or I'm not sure, but yeah. And then he obviously turned up at Manchester United soon enough, so maybe it was deliberate.
I was just going to say, I remember when that match happened, I was actually at a music festival, and sometimes when you go to festivals and things like that, you feel like, the football, well, I mean, especially because there's no phone signal in a lot of places and it's kind of like disconnected from everything. And I heard someone say, did you hear the Arsenal score? It was 8-2. And I went, no, it wasn't. Someone's having a laugh. But it took until the next day to actually look at something and take that in. That's one of the biggest scorelines, especially between two teams who are considered at the time to be, challenging for the title.
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you see scorelines like that, you do a double take. Even when Leicester beat Southampton 9-0 this season, I thought I was seeing things when I looked at my phone for that scoreline. So
Well, go to me because you just mentioned Leicester there, and also because you just upset me. So I'm going to talk about the time that Leicester beat Manchester United 5-3. It was the season before they won the league. So I think in the future we might look back at this as not quite a catalyst, but early signs of a few sparking embers of what was to be in the very near future. And it's interesting because at the time Manchester United, Di Maria was new to the club, and in this game he scored that wonderful chip effort. Falcao was there as well, and he hit the crossbar in this game. And I think that sort of sums up his career because it never got going at Manchester United. But most importantly, what I think is to remember is the performance of Jamie Vardy, who scored the goal to make it 4-3. Also, he won 2 penalties and got 2 assists. And I think that was when he sort of announced himself as kind of this new exciting player. Obviously, he'd been playing in the lower leagues for many years, but this is the first time where I think Premier League fans sort of started to notice the name of Jamie Vardy.
I have to agree with you on the Jamie Vardy part, but the rest of it just pains me because obviously it was against Man United and I can't be happy a victory over my team. I just can't. But Vardy was incredible, and it did definitely act in terms of his performance over the next year.
I do remember watching that, and I do remember because of my own allegiances of not liking Man United, I was definitely not unhappy to see, despite, I thought at any moment, I remember that game actually, and despite, there were moments during the game where I thought United were coming back, because when Di Maria scored that goal, was that like 4-2 or something at that moment, and I thought, or 3-2 or something, and that I thought they could come back into this game because of the team they had, but no, it was they were just put one step too far, and yeah, it's one of those games where, especially Leicester, who at the time were just, I don't think they scored like a lot of goals that season, and they were pulled from the brink of relegation by Pearson in his management in the final few games. So to get a result like that against Man United as well, that was an incredible game.
Yeah, they came very close to being relegated that year, and obviously we wouldn't have had the following, the magic of the following season. So I wonder how important a victory like that was, not only in terms of the obvious 3 points, but also what it does for the team spirit to know that you can beat a team like Manchester United, not the greatest Manchester United, the Louis van Gaal Manchester United, but still Manchester United.
A little asterisk beside it, please. A little asterisk there. Oh, Matt, what is one of your greatest memories, one of your favorite all-time games that you watched?
So whenever someone thinks of, ask me what is the craziest game you've watched, I always think of, I grew up in Saudi Arabia, so like you, was very far away from football in person, and it also meant, with the time difference, that any late games meant you'd have to stay up very late to watch them. Sometimes games would finish at like 1 a.m, and things like that. So there was one night where I knew that there was some like FA Cup on, and I would watch absolutely anything at that age. To be honest, I don't sit through any football like nowadays. For some reason, I tend to select carefully what I watch, but back then I would absolutely watch anything. I mean, now I would as well.
We were returning to those days.
Exactly, yeah. But back then I was, I think it was like 11 o'clock at night, and there was a match about to kick off, and it was Tottenham against Manchester City in the FA Cup. And Tottenham went 3-0 up, and Man City had Nicolas Anelka come off injured and Joey Barton sent off. And this was the most incredible comeback I have ever seen. It went to 3-3, and then there was a goal from, I think it was Mackham in the final in the final minutes, which just kind of like turned the game around. I really won't forget watching it, because I just thought there's absolutely no way. And I remember turning the channel over as well and being like, there's no point watching this. Tottenham have just, pulverized them. They've lost Nicolas Anelka, who is their best player. And we're down to 10 men. So complete write-off. But I actually got the BBC report up here. See who got the goals. Doesn't say. But it's annoying, because it was a really, really interesting second half, and you just saw the determination. Kevin Keegan said as well, they'll be talking about this game long after we've all gone, and it was just absolutely mad.
You can always trust Tottenham to bottle it, so there you are. There's never in doubt.
Had to get one Tottenham dig in there, Hal. We had to.
I can't help it. We have a few drinks, and somebody mentions Tottenham. It just slips out like I'm back in a pub,
That actually, Matt, that reminds me of one of my favorite games when I was a kid, which was, I hate to say it, but the Liverpool AC Milan Champions League final, which was another epic comeback. And I ran home from school. It had been recorded during the day on like one of those old VHS cassette tapes. And my parents hadn't recorded the whole match because they didn't know there was extra time. They'd only recorded, and they were in a pub downtown Vancouver watching it, and they had left at halftime, and there was no social media really, so they didn't know that Liverpool had come back. And they got a frantic call from me and my sister being like, where's the extra time? So it's that memory, that whole day, that memory of that game, it will always be epic to me.
Yeah, it is undoubtedly probably the greatest Champions League comeback there is, really. Like that I can remember anyway. But it's it'll sit in the mind of any football fan who sat through it, because it's just all in 6 minutes in that second half, like everything completely changed. And there was actually, I watched that with my dad, and about an hour before that game, one of our family friends was their car had broken down, like far away from where we live, so we actually had to drive down to pick them up, and it was about half an hour before the match. And my dad was like, I really don't care about these people, I have to get back and watch this game. So that was very memorable, because just that moment, because we were like, what if we miss it? What if something happens? So we managed to get back with about 5 minutes to spare. But yeah, that's kind of one of those tense moments that you think football always comes first before the people you love.
That's a motto for the podcast, I think, in the future.
Football comes first, always, before the people you love.
Before the people you love. But it also makes me think of a final which Steven Gerrard took by the scruff of the neck. Also, you had the FA Cup against West Ham, where he scored 2 absolute belters. And I remember in that game, I grew up an Arsenal fan, but I remember with my younger brother just after the game running into the garden and just throwing each other balls to volley. We'd scream, he's hit a humdinger. And then it's just the innocence of youth, before I could start hating opposition teams. Just enjoy the football.
That entire season, and I think the one afterwards as well, Steven Gerrard was at his absolute peak. And for a couple of years afterwards as well, he was the type of player where he genuinely it made you feel as a fan as if no game was over until the final was. It really felt like there was a game against Derby, I think, and it was 0-0 until the final minutes, and just he managed to battle his way through an entire team and I think either lay it off or finish it. But it was games like that where you thought he is the ultimate captain.
So Matt, you obviously have covered quite a few games, so changing course just a little bit, can you tell us about one of your favorite or craziest games you've ever covered?
Yeah, I covered the Football League for the Independent for a couple of seasons. I actually covered the Premier League for a bit, but as at the very beginning. But I thought, you know what, there's so much focus on the Premier League. It's hard to find an angle or write a story that someone else hasn't before. and I decided to ask if I could start reporting on the Football League as well. So I kind of switched down a level. And to be honest, to be completely honest, even though I will prefer and watch the Premier League, I think the Championship is probably the most interesting league to watch and entertaining, because as much as you can say in the Premier League, you know, any team can beat any team on their day, in the Championship, it's amplified by, you know, tenfold, because it's not just any team can beat any team on their day. Any team can beat any team on a bad or good day. It's so unpredictable. And so I followed both Leeds and Norwich the season before last. It's weird calling that last season, really. But yeah, so probably the craziest out of all of them was Norwich against Derby. It was around December, the end of December, and there was this. I think Norwich were 2-1 up, and there was about 15 minutes to go, or 20 minutes to go in the game, and there was, where we were positioned in the press box, you were kind of like underneath a stand in a very corner, so you couldn't really see where the floodlights were. And one of the floodlights just burst. One of the floodlights just kind of like stopped, and you couldn't really see it for 1 second. And someone went, "What's happened? What's happened?" And all players just stopped playing, and the referee kind of like pulled everyone to the middle, and they were all stood pointing. And he decided to bring everyone off the field, and they'd have a 15-minute break. And I think that's probably one of the very few times that's happened in probably Football League history, or at least for the last 20 or 30 years. And so they brought them all off. They came back on. They carried the game on, and Derby scored twice in those two. I think it was at half an hour, the break. And yeah, Derby scored twice and just turned the game entirely on its head and walked away with the 3 points. That for me, the drama there, the bizarre nature of the Championship, just kind of represented in that. There was Mason Mount, who obviously you know now plays for Chelsea, said that it was probably the craziest game he will ever play in his life. And yeah, it was, as much as Norwich as well that season. Norwich at home were incredible, and you couldn't write them off. They somehow managed to fall to defeat in that game, and it was incredible. Yeah, incredible following them that season.
That was the season that then led to Norwich getting promoted to this one.
Yeah, they finished top as well.
So you followed a lot of Championship football at that stage, and that would have been Frank Lampard in charge. What do you think of him and how he's done at Chelsea so far? And do you think it was right for him to move into that job on the basis of what he'd done at Derby?
It was a really weird kind of thing, because nobody expected him to make that immediate jump. You thought, oh, like he's come in at Derby and he's done a brilliant job there. The football they were playing, I'd you know, looking at ex-footballers, often people think that if they're a good footballer, they'll be a good manager, and that's such a strange assumption to have. You know, you wouldn't see necessarily, like, look at Thierry Henry, one of the greatest Premier League players and strikers, and he's had.
I don't want to back Arsenal.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. But the thing is, you know, you look at other players, other former, you know, captains and players like Lampard and like Gerrard, and they have done a good job. And you know, you bring a good team around you, and that's important. And I think Lampard saw a lot of, you know, managed to see the stars in like Fico Tomori, in Mason Mount, in players like that, and he's brought them into the team at Chelsea, and rightly so, because they were brilliant at Derby, and he did bring a style to them, which I thought, you know, they could do well in the Premier League. They could challenge for the top 10 the way that they were playing. They needed to boost their squad a bit, but yeah. So, I mean, I think give Chelsea time with the players that they've got, and give them the respect that they deserve, and Lampard deserves, for playing the young players and giving them an opportunity, which just doesn't happen in the Premier League. as much. Yeah, I think he's done a brilliant job for the task that he's been given as well, especially not being able to buy any players in that summer and in the January window. In the January window as well. Was the transfer ban? I forget. Was the transfer ban removed for the January window?
I think it might have been, but they didn't buy anybody, did they?
No, they only signed Ziyech to come in the summer.
I have a feeling that it might have been possible. I can't remember. It's so long ago.
Actually, I think it was lifted, and they were able to buy someone, but they didn't actually in the end.
Yeah.
See, this is how madness is, going from being in a football newsroom to not for a few weeks, and you forget everything that's happened. So 10 years ago, when Lampard was in charge of Derby, the success he's had at Chelsea so far, I think he needs to be given some praise for, because fine, Abramovich expects Chelsea to win the league every season, and fires a manager if they don't. If he's given the right time, I think Chelsea are going in the right direction.
So let me ask a proper stupid pub sort of question to you both. Who do you think will end up as a better manager, Steven Gerrard or Frank Lampard? Becky, I'll start with you. Put you on the spot there.
I want to say Gerrard because I always preferred him as a player, to be honest. But I do think what Lampard has been able to do with the young players at Chelsea and with the restrictions he had with the transfer ban has been pretty good. He was given a tough situation, and the way he handled it was fairly remarkable in the end, where they are right now. So I don't want to say it, but I think Lampard will end up being better and more successful.
Yeah, I don't think either of them will end up being that great, to be honest. But I think Gerrard's got his eye on Klopp's going to have to leave eventually, probably, within the next 3 seasons, probably, unless he tries to form a proper legacy at Liverpool. And Gerrard's doing decent work at Rangers, so I think he's got his eye on that spot at Liverpool, and he could slide in to that position, much like Lampard has slid into the Chelsea role. And then from there, it's anybody's guess, to be honest. I don't know. Matt?
Yeah, I think it is a very difficult one, because they're very similar in that they played in the same era, and they have been thrown into the deep end quite quickly. I think there is arguably a bigger amount of pressure on Gerrard at Rangers to try and challenge for the title than there is necessarily for Lampard, because Man City and Liverpool were so far and away better teams than the rest of them. And Celtic are undoubtedly the best team in Scotland. They, you can just see that the way that Rangers have stuttered. But I think in the long run, I think it is going to be, it'd probably be close. I think it's difficult to measure success as so much of saying who will bring in more trophies. But I think if Gerrard does eventually move to Liverpool as someone who knows the club and understands the club and has the right kind of ethos that would galvanize the fans and kind of take the right approach and play the right football, I think that if he does go to Liverpool and Liverpool still keep the kind of core elements and attract the right players, then it probably will be Gerrard.
Yeah, he could inherit a very good team if he takes over Klopp, depending on at what point Klopp leaves. So that could set him up quite nicely.
Matt, thank you for joining us on this podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure having you. I hope the rest of lockdown goes well for you as well.
Thanks. Same for you guys. The pleasure was all mine.
And as always, Hal, it's been a time.
Yeah, it's always good to have a drink and just talk about football. I love it. Thank
you, everyone, for tuning in to another episode of Champagne Football. We will be back next week with another episode.